Now, Mike Mitcham is a very fine researcher. He's been at the forefront of the Stop Smart Meters campaign, even addressed parliamentary committees, and I expect we shall hear something about this soon, because he's recognised that this is a serious issue and it needs some serious attention. So we're going to give that now. So please welcome Mike Mitcham.
Thank you very much. Okay, can you hear me okay? Can you hear me at the back? Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, Andy. Thank you for inviting me. Happy anniversary. I'm delighted to be here. I'm honoured to be here, in fact, to be speaking to you all today. So, as Andy said, I run a campaign group called Stop Smart Meters UK with a friend and colleague, Dr. Elizabeth Evans, who really brings the health credibility, or credibility to the health side of smart meters, but I'm here as her lackey today on that subject. Just for the record, I have a kind of technology background. I don't have any kind of vendetta or axe to grind with the energy industry. In fact, when I was a kid, I always thought I'd grow up and become a meter reader. You know, the gas man that we had coming around to our home, he'd come around every day just after my dad left for work. He'd always put a smile on my mum's face. And he always had a spring in his step when he left. And I thought it looked like a great job, but, you know, sadly, that didn't work out for me. I took a different route, and it's probably just as well, given that we have the sword of Damocles hanging down on us now in the form of smart meters. So, what we're going to cover over the next hour or so is what smart meters are, what they do, how they work. Maybe you're going to get a slightly different explanation of that than the one that you'll otherwise hear by the energy industry, but I will give them a chance to address you as well very shortly. We'll talk about the health impacts, privacy, security, grid security, which is a big issue, as well as cost implications. We'll talk about where this goes, potentially, and then we'll talk about what you can do to take action on this. So I'm going to start with the industry's pitch and how they want you to see smart meters.
British Gas, we're revolutionising the way our customers see their energy. We're upgrading you to smart meters, so you'll get accurate bills without submitting meter readings. And you'll get a breakdown of what you're spending on things like heating and lighting. With smart meters, you'll never see energy in the same way again. British Gas, we do more to look after your world.
So there you go. Who wants one? Come on, put your hand up. One of you must do. You will never see energy in the same way again. I would agree with them on that front. This is how they look in reality. They tend not to show smart meters in their true form because they're obviously not particularly exciting to look at. These are the US, Canadian, Australian models. I'm going to show you a UK one in a minute, but I show you this because this is a global initiative. Smart meters are being rolled out across most industrialized nations at pretty much exactly the same time. So this is a global agenda that we're dealing with and goes way beyond national government level. This is a map of current smart meter programs around the world. More than 1 million have been installed in the UK already. I hope none of you have one, but if you have, and by the end of this talk you want to get rid of it, I will try to help you with that, and we should be able to. So fear not if you have. The reason why there's so many that have been installed already, but there's more to come, there's 53 million smart meters that are earmarked to be installed across the UK. The reason why they've installed so many so far is organisations like British Gas have essentially run at this issue, realising the massive upside in terms of profits that they get with more data about how we use our energy and when we need to use our energy. And more often than not, what we're being told is that people are being written to saying, your meter needs replacing, needs upgrading, we need to come and change it. And they're just not being given the facts about this. So this is why we started the campaign. Worldwide, the smart grid market, which smart meters essentially provide the front end to, is expected to, the market's expected to reach £500 billion by 2050. And the Internet of Things, which I'll talk about, is expected to reach figures of $17 trillion. So this is enormous business. It's not just big business. This is terrifically big business. Smart meter designs vary from country to country. You'll see a UK one in a minute, as I say, but fundamentally, they do the same thing. And what they do that's different to how your current meter works is that they constantly monitor and measure your energy usage, what you're doing at home through your energy use and water use in some cases. And that private data that you're generating is communicated to the nearest cell tower through a government gateway known as the Digital Communications Company that's run by Capita. And finally, that's passed on to your energy or utility provider. To do this, smart meters contain two microwave transmitters, one for sending data to and from cell towers using pulsed mobile phone signals. The other connects with a new generation of smart gadgets, smart appliances, smart devices via pulsed Wi-Fi signals. So when your old washing machine, for example, your old TV dies, their replacements, if you're not on your guard, will likely be smart. And what that means is that they'll talk with your smart meter. They'll have an RFID chip inside them, a radio frequency identification chip that's able to communicate with the smart meter and essentially tell them what you're doing with that device. So what smart meters also allow is remote control of those appliances and remote termination of your supply. So it essentially puts an end to somebody having to come around to disconnect your energy supply. But the issue, and we'll talk about many of them, is that it's not just your energy provider that can terminate you, because this is now a web-enabled smart meter, and the capability to remote terminate your supply doesn't just lie with the energy provider, it lies with any hackers that have the capability to do it, and we'll talk about those as well. The one benefit for you in this is that you get to see what energy you're using in real time. This is called an in-home display unit. And I say that you'll get to use it. You'll probably use it for a couple of weeks before the batteries run out and you realise you don't check it that often and you stick it in the drawer, which is typically what we see. As it happens, a £15 energy monitor that you can buy online would do the same job as this in-home display unit, but what your own energy monitor wouldn't do is report your data back to your energy company, and it wouldn't allow your energy company to remotely terminate your supply. So at £15, it's also a lot cheaper than the smart meter program as well. So what kind of appliances are we talking about that suddenly need to be ruined by having the internet put in them? This, a Wi-Fi kettle, naturally, with Bluetooth pairing mode, which is obviously what we've all just been waiting for, right? So this thing will connect with your smartphone. We all breathe a collective sigh of relief. I mean, I can see the one advantage of this, isn't it? If you've got this connected to your smartphone, you can take your eye off the kettle to concentrate on what you're doing with your new smart frying pan. Integrated connectivity, so you have instant access, not just to one, but over 50 curated recipes, ladies and gentlemen, so long as your phone's charged. Otherwise, there's a very good chance that if you're the kind of person that buys this, you'll starve. The manufacturer does not accept liability for any harm or third-degree burns caused when you are burning yourself by staring at your phone instead of concentrating on what you're cooking. If you get fed up with it, stick it in your new smart bin. We've all been waiting for one of these as well, right? Now, part of the computing realm includes your bin, so your trash can crash as well. Coming soon, October this year. This is real, by the way. Connect your cat's water supply to the internet. Why? Because of reasons, right? That's why we need to connect our cat's water supply to the internet. Cats are, apparently, despite popular belief, incredibly stupid. And without human intervention, they wouldn't be able to think to drink. This is a worldwide problem. It's been burning away for some time. Your cat needs the smart cat water fountain. If you love your cat, you'll get him one. Why? Well, for starters, you can keep tabs on exactly how much water Felix is drinking, determining both real time and historically how much water he's taken, and if he's not paying his share of the bill, Set a maximum limit so the little scrounger stops taking advantage of your generous nature. And if he didn't repay you with enough affection last week, fourth item down, you can dial down his water allowance. That'll remind him who's boss, right? And if you cast your eyes to the bottom, we have an affection level ranking. So you can rate your cat against your neighbour's cats and all your friends' cats. See whether or not your cat is being affectionate enough. And if that hasn't convinced you, other fountains come with endless paperworks, right? Paperwork involved in maintaining non-smart cat water fountains are obviously mountainous. If you don't have a cat, fear not, there is a smart water bottle for you that will tell you, through breakthrough innovation technology, how much water is left in your bottle. Humanity now finally can take that giant leap forward that we've been waiting for. And what kind of socks will you be wearing for this giant leap forward? Smart socks. That's it. Did you forget to change your socks again this morning? Did you forget to put any on, like me? Expect a phone call from your sock drawer sometime soon. Tired of controlling the television with your remote control? Fear not, because the ability to control it with your bottom has arrived. On Kickstarter, a crowdfunding website, they raised £7,000 for this. And here we have Belty. If you're keen to lose a few more pounds, this smart belt not only tracks how much your waistline changes over the course of the days and weeks and months, but if it thinks that you haven't moved enough today, it will vibrate. Is that a smart belt on your trousers, Dave, or are you just pleased to see me? I'm not even going to talk about that one. But suffice to say that it comes complete with the Roll Scout. This raised $13,000 on Kickstarter and is now available for pre-order. And I just love the way they're selling this. If your customer's in there and he doesn't have paper, you might lose that customer. Love the fear. So, joking aside, we're going to talk a bit more about the Internet of Things because there is a far darker side to it, but there is a funny side too. And if you can't laugh about these things, then what can you do? But we're going to talk about health now. The smart grid, smart meters, and all of these modern digital wireless devices essentially carry pulsed information-carrying microwaves. They're different to what we've evolved with over time, and I'm going to explain why that is, but we'll go through this. We're going to spend quite a bit of time on this. But this is a big concern because even if you've withdrawn consent for a smart meter, if your neighbour hasn't, then potentially you're affected by that. This is what a smart meter sounds like to the human ear. But this is what it sounds like to every cell in your body.
The government still let them do it.
So that was a measurement I took at a restaurant in Fulham. A lady got in touch with us to say that BG had tried to convince her to get one of these things and they'd succeeded eventually. Her bill had rocketed, doubled, and she was facing bankruptcy if she didn't get this thing out of her restaurant. And I took my microwave meter with me, and that's what it showed. British Gas have told me that representatives of British Gas have told me smart meters don't emit microwaves. And when I threatened to complain, they said, oh yeah, no, they do emit microwaves, yes, but they're less than a mobile phone, which is also not true. In one 24-hour period, you can be exposed to up to 190,000 pulses of microwave radiation. And that's just from one smart meter. So if you have a bank of smart meters, then do the maths. The one that you just saw emits 43,200 pulses of microwave radiation a day, every day, 365 days a year. So even if you use, a Wi-Fi router, whatever it might be, or occasionally you use your smartphone, you've got the ability to switch it off. You can't do that with the smart meter. You're not able to manage electropollution in your home with these things. So, like I say, in a block of flats, there's nothing stopping there being a bank of 40 or 50 smart meters literally sitting on the other side of a wall to a baby's crib. Why is that a problem? As I mentioned, smart meters emit two kinds of microwaves. One that sits in typically 800 or 900 megahertz range, which is mobile phone frequencies, and they also emit Wi-Fi, which sits in around about 2.45 gigahertz. So very close together in the scheme of things on the EMF spectrum. But we can look at both types of microwave radiation, their impacts, to get an idea of how these things might impact on us. This is taken from a study that was published in JAMA, Journal of the American Medical Research Association, a very, very reputable peer-reviewed journal. And what it showed is that 50 minutes of having a cell phone next to your head, not making an active call, but just having it at rest, capable of receiving a call, so the phone is occasionally pinging, communicating with the cell tower, shows that the effect on the brain is an alteration of brain chemistry. It affects brain glucose metabolism. I have doctors who are friends who've talked about whether there's a possible link here between Alzheimer's disease and mobile phones and wireless phones, deck cordless phones, etc., because Alzheimer's disease is also known as diabetes of the brain. And if we're messing around with blood glucose metabolism levels, then potentially there's an issue there. This is also an adult brain. Children's skulls are much thinner than adult skulls, so the radiation goes much, much deeper. And the model that's used to test whether or not a mobile phone is safe or not, the specific absorption rate, is based on a US Army soldier's head, which tends to be quite thick. No offense, seriously. Much thicker than a child's. This was taken from the European Reflex Project. It compares 3 comet assays. That's the test that's used to determine whether something causes DNA damage. What you can see on the left is the control. So this is what your DNA should look like in a test if it's not been exposed to any toxins. What the middle object shows is DNA that's been damaged by 1,600 chest x-rays. And what you can see on the right, the third image, is the effect that 24 hours of mobile phone exposure has. If you have some views on RF radiation, and if those views are it can't harm us, this is evidence that it does harm. But the issue that you might be struggling with is X-rays sit in the ionizing side of the electromagnetic spectrum. Microwaves sit in the non-ionizing side of the electromagnetic spectrum. Why is the effect the same? We'll talk about that in a little while, but essentially, the pathway is different. Harm is caused a different way. It doesn't go in through the front door, it comes in through the back window. So what Reflex concluded is that the results confirm the likelihood of long-term genetic damage in the blood and brains of users of cell phones and other sources of electromagnetic fields, for example, smart meters. This is from the International Journal of Radiation Biology, another peer-reviewed study by Kasari et al. In 2011, I think it was. And it's using brain cells of rats that were exposed to Wi-Fi for 2 hours per day for 35 days. So it's a total of 70 hours exposure. And it shows the same effect. Those red comets should be red balls, red tennis balls, not red comets. The tail that you see is DNA strand breakage. It shouldn't look like that. This is indicating single and double strand DNA breakage, basically. The concern that we have now, bearing this in mind and more studies like it, is that school children in the UK are facing the prospect of being in a Wi-Fi environment when they're in school, having a Wi-Fi emitting iPad or something similar on their lap, and proximity to the source of the emission is key as well. Further away you put yourself from the emission, the better for you it is. So they're in that environment for 12,000 hours of their school life. They're coming home, they're being exposed to Wi-Fi, a deck cordless phone, maybe wireless games consoles, and maybe they've got a smartphone in their pocket the rest of the time as well. And there is absolutely There was no pre-market testing done for safety for these kinds of wireless gadgets either. The kind of impact that we can expect, all kinds of pathology, is just incredible. But if we look at fertility, this is sperm that's not exposed to mobile phone radiation. They're swimming around, highly motile, active. They're, looking for a date. If you then expose them to 12 hours of cell phone radiation, the picture changes. I mean, this kind of looks like a war zone. They're clearly not getting the business done. There's less of them. Some of them have died completely. This is not a good picture, and that's just 12 hours exposure. We have a presentation on our website by Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a Nobel Prize winner, by the way, and she set up, I think, the National Institute for Environmental Health. It's a great presentation. She talks about a crisis in fertility right now, and she also talks about the fact that if you, gentlemen, have a mobile phone in your pocket for 4 hours, it will reduce your sperm count by up to 50%. The good news is, if you take the phone out, your body will start recovering. But if you have a child that's constantly exposed to that, this is where their reproduction is happening, lots of development happening. This is not good. So we need to start eliminating these things. The children of the future don't look like they're off to a good start here. What I'm going to show you now is the effect of a smart meter on human blood cells, and this is the first video of its kind to show this as well.
While industry has failed to do any peer-reviewed studies on smart meters and health effects, a growing body of independent research is now starting to accumulate.
In our second set of tests, we're using the smart meter. Before the exposure, we see the same thing as we saw in the first samples. Normal cell walls, fairly separated and looking healthy. So after 2 minutes of exposure in front of the smart meter at about 1 foot away, we see a totally different story. Sample 1, you can see a lot of degradation in the cells. The cell walls have been broken, and you see changes in the cells which are called mycoplasma. It shows a mutation to the cell. In the second sample, we see a different type of degradation to the cell membranes. You can see a corrugation here. This is called bottle cap formation, and it's known that this occurs due to oxidation or exposure to free radicals. So this third subject, when we did her sample, she had to be pulled away from the meter after 45 seconds because she complained about an increasingly severe headache. And here you see a phenomenon called rouleau, where the red blood cells are stacking up, which makes it very difficult for the blood to deliver oxygen to the tissues as they would be their normal function. Every single one of these is a degradation. Every single one of these shows a trauma to the blood cells. And that came from something, and the only variable was the smart meter.
Okay, so what about other formal studies on wireless radiation? I often hear people say, there's no evidence that wireless causes any harm, and if there was, we'd know about it. You have to go and look for it, because to a large extent, our media relies on broadcast technology. They rely on wireless connectivity. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the news. I'm sorry, but we're going to have to now stop broadcasting. Is probably not going to happen anytime soon. So you have to go and look for this stuff, and there's now more than 5,000 studies. In fact, there's over 20,000 showing that there's some kind of effect on the body. 5,000 of them show that it's harmful. This is just a snapshot of 2% of them. So if we dig into one, we can look at the blood-brain barrier impacts. This is by Dr. Leif Solfrid and his team at Sweden's Lund University. And the good news is, there's lots of people looking into this and who are trying to bring this into the attention of the public, but at the moment they're not winning. He's studied the impact of microwave radiation on the blood-brain barrier and has shown that it leaks when it's exposed. And that's worrying because our blood-brain barrier is the last line of defense for our brain against toxins. And this is at a time when when many people are experiencing an increase in the amount of toxins in their lives. We can include wireless radiation from that because it has a toxic impact on the body. Air pollution, aerosols, GMOs, pharmaceutical interventions, mercury fillings, pesticides, etc., etc. And somebody said to me, okay, well, wake me up when the study's been replicated. This was the 16th study looking at exactly this issue, and there's now over 20 showing exactly the same effect. And again, another worrying thing is that the leakage happened at a level 5,000 times lower than what's apparently safe according to Public Health England. So what does the military know about this stuff, given that the military relies on it and has been using it for such a long time? They actually know quite a lot, having published research into the issue. This is a collection of nearly 2,500 studies that they reported on in the 1970s. And it shows that they know about functional changes, pathological changes, that's disease changes, degeneration of body tissue, EEG changes in the brain. Remember, we're electrical beings, so this is interfering with us and our brains and other systems. So if they knew about it, why hasn't something been done? This is a formally classified US DIA document, also from the early 70s, into radio frequency radiation and microwave capabilities, very similar. In fact, microwave sits within the radio frequency part of the EMF spectrum. So radio frequency and microwave capabilities on foreign and communist countries. And there's a section dealing with the biological significance of radiation and another dealing with anti-personnel applications. So you can apparently make weapons out of this kind of radiation. And as concerning as that is, the standout paragraph is this: if the more advanced nations of the West are strict in the enforcement of stringent exposure standards, there could be an unfavourable effect on industrial output and military function. The Eurasian communist countries could, on the other hand, give lip service to strict standards, but allow their military to operate without restriction and thereby gain the advantage in electronic warfare techniques and the development of anti-personnel applications. So essentially, this is evidence that our health and that of our children has been sacrificed on the altar of the military-industrial complex, all apparently to keep us safe. Not that the telecoms industry thinks that that's a done deal and stop worrying about the truth coming out, because they keep a lid on things with some very slick moves. This is the state-of-the-art £50 million cancer research facility in Cambridge. It's called the Li Ka-shing facility. Does anybody know who Li Ka-shing is? He's the chairman of Hutchison Whampoa, the largest Asian investor in the UK. They've invested over £14 billion in infrastructure here, including 3G wireless antennas across the country. He gave £10 million in funding to help this get built. And not that I'm wanting to pick a fight with cancer research, because I know that there's some outstanding people that work there, and the work that they do is very important. But I wonder why the vast majority of research into cancer and other pathological diseases and conditions is dedicated to detecting, treating, and operating on those diseases, rather than what's causing them in the first place. Especially when you see trends like this. And please don't let this detract from other potential causes of autism, because I'm well aware of the fact that this is a very complex picture. But when you look at the rise in autism over the last 40 years, and then you look at the rise in typical RF exposures and how they've increased essentially in line with each other, you have to ask the question of whether or not there's a correlation here. But that question's not being asked, and Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt, who I'll talk about shortly, is now able to predict autism in children based on looking at the amount of exposure pregnant mothers have to artificial electromagnetic fields in their sleeping environment. So, if nothing else, switch off any wireless devices you have when you go to bed. A lot of people say, well, we're surrounded by microwave radiation, we have been since the Big Bang, we've evolved with it, nothing to worry about, little more can't hurt us. It's true that we do have background microwave radiation, but it is absolutely tiny compared to what you're allowed to expose your brain to under UK health legislation. Under natural conditions, we have exposure of around 0.0000000010 microwatts per square metre. But in contrast, the wireless standards that the UK adopts allows you to expose your brain to 9 million microwatts per square metre from each individual device that you own. So to put that into some meaningful context, if you were to take the natural background radiation and equate it to the width of a standard piano keyboard, then the amount that's allowed to penetrate your brain from every wireless device that you own would reach the sun and back 4.5 million times. That's the difference that we're talking about. So if you hear anybody saying, oh, we're surrounded by radiation, what we're talking about is the difference between 17 bathtubs of water and all of the water on the face of the earth. It's biblically higher what you're allowed to expose your brain to. And the reason why we have this problem is, in fact, one thing I'll also say is that that's based on exposing your brain, and you have some bone matter here, and that was taken into account with these specific absorption rate tests. If you put a phone in your pocket, if you have a child that puts an iPad or a mobile phone on their lap, or if you put your phone in your top pocket, you've got a rib cage there, and there's less bone density, so you can be exposed to 4 to 8 times more radiation in those areas than you are next to your head. So the reason why we have this problem is because Public Health England views the human brain as this, essentially. They test for potential harm by placing a temperature probe in one of these liquid-filled US Army personnel officers' rubberized dummy heads, and they see how long it takes for the probe to heat up. And if it takes longer than 6 minutes to heat up by 1 degree, then apparently it's safe. And that's the only test they use for looking at whether or not this has an impact on the incredibly complex environment that the human body is. Your head is not a bucket of warm, salty, sugary water. But as I've said before, I can't speak for those running Public Health England. For starters, it takes no account of the effects that happen outside of heating. They have a thermal model. They just look at whether it causes heating. They don't look at whether it causes anything else. There is a random movement of ions in a bucket of water, whereas there's controlled movements in the brain and gated movements. For that reason, the UK standards were voted out of date and obsolete a few years ago in an EU parliamentary motion, but the UK has ignored that motion and said we're going to carry on anyway. And it's worrying, given how little we know, particularly about the human brain. And to illustrate this point, I've got an audio clip I'm going to share with you where Professor Brian Ford believes he's identified intelligence within our cells. So you've heard the noise smart meters make. Have a listen to your brain cells.
So for the very first time, you can actually hear the utterances that one nerve cell is making to another. And this rather haunting sound is almost like, I think, seabirds on a cliff talking to each other.
Let's hear it. So what's going on?
Well, we always tend to teach these days that thought and data processing in the brain goes on at the synapses, the junctions between brain cells. I don't believe that. I believe that thought is going on within the nerve cells. The nerve cell is the most highly evolved cell that we know, and it cannot just be switching on or off like a transistor.
So what are the implications for things like stem cells, which everybody's talking about in terms of stem cell research?
The stem cell, for example, viewed in my model, is seen as a human in microbe form. I don't see us, you see, as bodies divided up into cells. I see us as great communities of independent, almost free-thinking cells that come together to produce the effect that we know of as human life.
Well,
Jim, you've gone suddenly almost speechless, which I have to say is uncharacteristic for you.
Well, no, I mean, just, after a description of what is the nature of life, it's a question of where you go next, really.
Well,
I think the answer is Gary Richardson, in fact, but...
Yep. Independent, free-thinking cells that come together. We're going to have to go to the sport now. So, I wanted to share this with you because I think it's lovely. John Evans is a former Cambridge mathematician who has a deep interest in embryology, embryogenesis, and morphogenesis. And he created 2D and 3D modeling software and took his interests to look into how embryos are formed, because nobody really knows how we become the shape that we are. What he looked at here, this is a very early stage embryo. There's no limbs to speak of at the moment. In fact, there's very little discerning features, but what we do have are these somites. This goes on to become the ganglia in the central nervous system, which you just heard part of. And what he thought is, they look a bit like antennas. I wonder what would happen if I put these into my modelling software and applied some different frequencies to them. And anyone familiar with cymatics? Where you can essentially, sound creates form in the real world. Very interesting. If you haven't seen it, have a look into it. Well, he took this shape and applied some frequencies, and this is what he got. Recognize anything? I mean, it's very primitive, you know, but we've got maybe outlines of legs at the bottom here, reproductive organs, shoulders, arms, mouth, certainly, outline of the face, 2 eyes, mouth, nose, forehead. I mean, that wasn't part of the previous picture, but when he applied frequencies, this is the picture that he got. And the view is that as we develop and we grow and our cells divide and propagate around the body, we essentially listen ourselves into existence based on where we're located in this field. So I'm sure most of you are familiar with Rupert Sheldrake and his work on morphogenesis, which this ties very nicely into. I'd love to meet him and have a chat with him about this. We are the original wireless device, is the theory, and we're interfering very badly with that through artificial signals. Let's talk a little bit about mechanisms for harm before we move on. Some people mistakenly believe that there's no way RF radiation can cause harm. Problem is they're looking at it the wrong way. Stephen Sinatra, cardiologist, and Dietrich Klinghart are both able to show not only what harm is caused, but how harm is caused. Nitric oxide disruption is commonly seen to be a problem. I'd never heard of it, I have to admit, before I started looking into this, but there's been over 100,000 papers written about nitric oxide, the discovery of its role in the central nervous system and cardiovascular system signaling when it's found as the Nobel Prize. It's pretty important. Wi-Fi disrupts that signaling, and so do other kinds of wireless emissions. This again, I won't go into this too much, but the reaction that the body has when it gets these foreign frequencies is to have a stress response. So it produces something called reactive oxidative species. And reactive oxidative species are free radicals. I'm sure most of us have heard of free radicals and the benefits of taking antioxidants. Oxidation in the body is not good, and we can show that this is what happens. Voltage-gated calcium channels leak, work by Dr. Andrew Goldsworthy, Professor Martin Paul. We're starting now to really, really understand not just what kind of harm is caused, but how harm is caused. You know, it's out in the open now. The question isn't, you know, we need to look into this more. The question is, we need to tell more people about this. We need to start doing something about it. And it's not just us that are affected either. Bees navigate using electromagnetic fields. They're able to detect different weather systems from miles away. And they're getting lost. You know, they're literally getting lost in a toxic soup of electromagnetic radiation. And I am not going to stand here and say I'm a fan of Dow Industries and DuPont and Syngenta and Monsanto and co, because I do think that neonicotinoids will have, you know, some kind of massive impact. You know, it's again another toxin, but we're not looking at this issue, and I don't just think it's the neonicotinoids that are to blame. It's a photo taken outside somebody's house who just had a smart meter installed. He kept bees, and it decimated his. In fact, my next door neighbour had bees, and when he got rid of all these wireless devices, his bees returned. So I'll come back to this, but what were once thought to be, in fact, what were once known to be and proven to be extensively tested and safe, the list is, you know, a long one and it's very hard reading. And I don't know how many decades of denial this would add up to, but we can add on a few more for GMOs, BPAs, artificial microwaves, etc. So, quickly moving on, that was health. We could talk about it all day, but we don't have time. This is how the privacy picture currently looks
Converted into nearly 51,000 bytes
through
of
the
data.
lens of a cell phone.
The multimedia message, or MMS. This particular message is one of 28,000 sent every second into the World Communication Network. It accompanies categories of information like emails, ISP data, weblogs, and voice data. When deciphered, these communications carry with them a pattern, or metadata, that reveal information like the user's number, who the receiver is, the location sent, the date and time of the message, the duration, the amount of data transmitted, and the subsequent cost of that transmission. The average user will have 736 pieces of this personal information collected every day. Over time, this information amounts to the user's digital identity, which is accessible anytime in their service provider's retention period. Verizon withholds this information for 12 months, AT&T for 84, Sprint for 24, and T-Mobile for 60 months. Most individuals will have over 1 million pieces of information spanning the past 45 months already in their provider's possession. A third party owning nearly 4 years of your life. Not only do users pay for the access to information through cell phones, computers, and data plans, but those who partake in the network pay to be unknowing participants in a vast study group. If you use this network, your 4 years of information is extracted and sold without consent, contributing to the nearly $34,000 accumulated every second by the information sector. The specifics of nearly all digital interactions are sold to a variety of entities. Among them are ad servers that assign the individual a demographic based on their digital histories. Once assigned, individualized information is deployed to the user. Location data is filtered into intrusive localized advertising. Facebook likes transform into custom Walmart ads, and search engine results are narrowed to a limited scope. The global internet becomes the personal internet, and information ceases to be information at all.
Search results are limited based on who you are, where you've been, and information ceases to become true information. That's not good. Those data points that you get from your phone, from your store cards, your smartphones, your laptop, your smart meter, your new Wi-Fi kettle, etc., is being fed into a world of data analytics, data mining companies, so that our lives can be examined, a profile of us can be built, we can be looked at, not necessarily sinisterly, but we can be fully examined in terms of how we behave and analysed, and we can be predicted, we can be monetised, and we can be further controlled by the people with access to it. Does anybody know what this is? Or more specifically, this point here. This is the point at which you change your Facebook profile to in a relationship. That's the point where you tell Facebook that your status has changed if you're on Facebook. But at what point, the black dots show an interaction between you and your newfound mate. 0 mark is the point where you change your status. At what point does Facebook know that you're going to be entering a relationship with that person? At what point do you know? Is it before or after Facebook? And who owns that data? Somebody asked Facebook this question and they said, sorry, we don't even release anonymized data to the public. This is strictly for internal use. So Facebook owns that data, and I've got a massive problem with that, and I believe it's totally wrong. And if you want to know why, take a look at the case of Medbase 200, which reportedly used proprietary models to generate and sell marketing lists of rape victims, domestic abuse victims, and patients with a variety of illnesses. Whether we like it or not, Computing is becoming much more personal now. You used to have to walk to a computer or drive to a computer to use it 40 years ago. Today we wear them and we go to bed with them. I wouldn't encourage that, by the way, but a lot of people do. And so the data that is generated is an extension of ourselves. We're using these technologies to express ourselves in the real world, and the data that's generated is part of who we are. So we own that data. The data is ours. You know, I think we kind of have to look at this. And what many people don't realize is that if you're signing up to, you know, Yahoo or Hotmail or Facebook or whatever it is, and you're signing up to a free service like that, it's free because you're the product that's being sold. That's why it's free. We are the quarry that's being mined today. And this is becoming the increasingly dominant business model as well. And as that becomes more dominant, you know, people will be very familiar with what happened a couple of hundred years ago with the slave trade, where individuals were bought and sold as commodities. What do you call a business where everything about you, except your body, is sold and traded as a commodity? This is what we have today as a dominant business environment. You call that business today Facebook, and others like it. And in the future, we're going to call them smart grid companies. Now, privacy is important, and we need to kind of, you know, remember how we've got to the point of having documents like this, and regarding privacy is something that's a necessary and fundamental right. This is a congressional research paper that showed with smart meters particularly, not only will companies have access to your data, but agencies like the police will too, allowing them to track people's daily lives at home, including what and when we eat, when we sleep, whether that sleep's broken, how often it's broken, how long we're awake, what our showering and bathing habits are, what appliances and devices we're using, and whether we prefer the TV to the treadmill. This is a report by Oxford University's Internet Institute that shows it goes a lot deeper. And smart meters can actually show whether or not you have mental health issues, whether or not you've ever left the kids home alone. Think about the implications of that in a custody battle. This patent application shows that it goes even further. It's by Verizon, and they applied for a patent for something called the Smart TV Detection Zone, which will be able to determine who's sitting in front of the telly, what they're doing, what facial expressions they're using, what kind of mood they're in, and whether they're arguing. And when this hit the news, they were selling the fact that if you were having a row with your other half, the TV would know and be able to serve up an advert for marriage counselling. So I kind of, you know, I might get one of these because I'm just looking for that final excuse to throw my TV out of the window. This piece by Onzo, a data analytics company, reckons your smart meter will be able to predict falls. If you're using appliances differently, then that's potentially a marker that you're suffering from an illness, which is a precursor to falls, and, you know, BG can potentially send intervention, or E.ON, or EDF, or whoever it is that's supplying your energy, but of course they won't be. And what this shows is that the smart meter data set is being looked at by other industries. It goes way beyond the mandate of energy companies. Fear not, though, because the government is acting on this. Around the world, governments are taking action. And what this new ruling by the CPUC in California showed is that protection of consumer data is being enabled by giving away access to that data. They said that we hope our action today enables authorised third parties to use this information, to use your private information, and that they hope it will stimulate interest in the data, stimulate market interest. Thanks. Michael Peavy, the former head of the CPUC, is currently under investigation for knowing that smart meters caused harm to some people. The former CIA director, David Petraeus, was one person who said smart meters will revolutionize clandestine operations before, ironically, information about his private life destroyed his career. The NSA's new $2 billion data center in Bluffdale is one of many that's being built to harvest this kind of data. This is where, you know, we're going to be seeing well, we're not going to be seeing any of it happening, but this is where this data will be harvested. But you've got nothing to hide, right? If anybody says that to you, please give them a copy of Anne Frank's book. They had access, the Frank family had access to water, a gas stove, and electricity, and a single light bulb in the evening. They wouldn't have lasted a day in the smart grid. And they didn't have anything to hide until they had to hide. So let's talk about grid security. Putting a smart meter into our home essentially puts your energy and water supply onto the web. It's all well and good doing it, connecting to the web with your smartphone or your computer. Some of your data is going to be at risk. But with a smart meter, your energy supply is going to be at risk. And with web-enabled water meters that can be remotely disconnected, your water supply is at risk. Now, like I say, this is happening at a point in time when cyber warfare is on the increase. An Ofgem smart meter got hacked, Ofgem-approved smart meter got hacked last year. 2 years ago, ethical hackers in Germany showed how easy it was to hack a smart meter. This is a story from this week, where hackers were able to take control of a Jeep remotely while somebody was driving it, putting 470,000 Jeeps at risk. And I took this yesterday from the Norse Corp website. It's a real-time tracker of cyber attacks across the globe. Cyber attacks aren't something we hear a lot about all too much, and we certainly rarely see it visualized like this. This looks like a war's going on. And in fairness, I don't know what else I would call it. It is a cyber war that's going on right now. The largest source of cyber attacks yesterday at 11 o'clock in the morning was China. Third down was the UK. So we're living in a smart glass house and we're throwing stones. Not clever. Lockheed Martin, the military contractor, has said that the smart grid will allow China to attack US energy supplies. GCHQ have warned about this as well, saying that it will allow terrorists to target individual homes. We were so concerned about this issue, we teamed up with David Chalking to issue a challenge to British Gas to let us hack one of their smart meters live on TV. It remains unaccepted. Let's talk about bills. Are we all going to save loads of money with smart meters? The evidence suggests not. £400 per home is what it's costing us for a £12 billion programme. So if you believe your energy company will give you that money back, or will give you that money back at the estimated saving of £23 a year, it will take them 16 years to pay back. Germany's looked at the business case. Other countries have looked at the business case and said the savings don't appear to stack up. Pilot tests around the world have shown the same thing. In the States, comment that was made was it's devastating to their plan. The report shows that 0 statistically different results in usage happen compared to business as usual, which, and when you drill down into this, 9% of people saved some energy, but 91% of people didn't, which is amazing news if you are a shareholder in big energy. A one-year study by Toronto Hydro showed that smart meters resulted on average in 50% increases for 80% of people. I don't have time really to talk about fracking, but there is a massive amount of water that's going to be used with fracking. About 20 million litres per well, 36,000 wells just in the southeast, means 70 trillion litres of fresh water will be gone from the water supply forever. Do we think there might be a reason why they're rolling out water meters? Let's talk about possible outcomes. The Internet of Things is a big worry, and this is how the EU are pitching it right now.
It's crazy that we doubled our use of energy in the last 50 years. We can't keep this up.
1,400 transport units, 520,000 kilometres per day, 1,750 hours of travel.
What do I need? Milk, eggs, bacon, fish sticks, condoms. Oh, chewing gum.
Yes, hello? No, I still need to order bandages. Okay. There aren't any more needles. Where's the... I'll put you through. Oh, and I still need to do this.
Don't you have the feeling we're standing still all the time? Why has it become part of our lives?
Isn't it strange that roads are getting longer? Shouldn't evolution make the world more efficient?
And while we're standing still, we pollute even more.
Why can't we focus on people instead of procedures?
What if objects start to sense and communicate? becoming tools to help us deal with complex and urgent situations.
What if all objects were interconnected? What if there was an Internet of Things?
With the Internet of Things, applications are infinite. We could be able to monitor our transport better, winning precious time at any turn, way beyond smart logistics as we know it.
With an Internet of Things, we could be able to monitor from a distance. Instead of spending time in a hospital, people could actually live their lives.
Emptying our carts would be a thing of the past. It would also limit forgetfulness. We wouldn't even need a shopping list. We could easily ping our refrigerator at home to tell us what's missing.
If we want to be smart about energy, we could let energy be smart about itself. With the Internet of Things, we could be able to manage our world differently, adding a new dimension to the Internet as we know it.
The Internet of Things, part of our future.
So I can't comment on all that, but no privacy in future, right? This is devoid of privacy, this world that they're building, and IBM is very much a driving force behind this. They're pushing smart into pretty much every major market sector right now. You'll see them on TV occasionally pop up and say, I'm building a smarter planet, I'm an IBMer. They don't say much else. That's a concern. IBM created Hollerith, which was used by the German government in the 40s to identify and profile sections of the population. And I'm trying to figure out how this advert would have looked to the people at the time. All-seeing eye, off-right triangle of light, and a lamppost, because if you noticed in the advert, they're using it again. What's that all about? Is it a joke? Is it coincidence? It's sick. And so I'm at a loss as to why that's being invoked again. Hollerith was used to track people at the time in the 1940s, undesirables. Smart grid will be capable of tracking all of us all the time. This is David Cameron's attempt to usher the Internet of Things into public consciousness last year by giving money to it. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but even if you don't have smart devices, this is the picture that your smart meter can create based on appliances that you're using essentially the load that's being called from each of those devices. Time of use billing is coming as well. This is something that Ofgem have repeatedly said, no, we're not going to mandate time of use billing, where your bill varies literally kind of by the minute or the hour. You pay differently for each hour that you're using. But this report that they publish shows that they're planning exactly that. And also, in fact, they're openly promoting the idea to energy companies, and they have this use of real-time asset capabilities and active demand control. That means controlling appliances, controlling your thermostat, switching your fridge off or dialing things down if you're using too much power. We've talked about cyber attacks. I don't have much time left, but potentially where this goes is if we have everything, all industries put online, and then you have an increase in cyber attacks, I can't think of a better opportunity to introduce mandatory internet licensing and such like. Carbon taxation is being talked about using smart meters as well. This is from an Open EU document, a think tank, where they talk about, as a backstop to control consumption, smart meters are used to cut off customers from non-critical electricity use. They'll define that, not you, along with civil and criminal penalties for exceeding rations. So not only is Hollerith making a comeback, ration cards might be as well. Okay, so I've got one more thing. We talked about the bees briefly. Let's have a look at how the bee problem is being looked at in certain parts of the world.
"5 years ago, these fields were a barren wasteland. Honeybee colonies were collapsing, and pollination had all but stopped. But all of this has changed now, because bees are back. But wait, what is this? You might think these are ordinary bees, but let us take a closer look. These little marvels of advanced robotics are second-generation new bees. Far superior to their nature counterparts, they have been successfully implemented all over the world. Completely solar-powered, a new bee requires very little downtime to recharge. Using real-time triangulation technology, each new bee knows which part of the field has been pollinated, maximizing efficiency and yield. Unlike standard bees, new bees are fully equipped to fight their natural enemies. As soon as a predator approaches, the new bees are alerted, release a fast-acting insecticide, and neutralize the threat in a second. Nothing can harm them. New bees do not tire, require minimum maintenance, and are produced for a fraction of the upkeep cost of normal bees. They are easily recycled, replaced, and activated. New bees blend in perfectly with nature and are programmed not to harm us. Soon you'll be able to purchase a whole new colony and activate it in your fields. New bees, the future is already here.
I'm going to close there. It's a very well done warning. This isn't real. It was done by Greenpeace, and it was to show the harm that neonicotinoids are doing in the path that we're on. They don't raise any issue about wireless, which troubles me, but this is actually a real phenomenon. The University of Sussex is trying to upload the consciousness of a real bee to an artificial one as we speak. So, very quickly, what can we do? The first thing to do is say no. This is a wide open goal. I don't know many other issues where we're asked for our consent on this kind of thing. So the first thing to do is remove your consent. Proactively withdraw it. Phone your energy company. Tell them what you know about smart meters and tell them why you don't want one. You can do that via our website as well, by the way, Stop Smart Meters. Talk to your neighbours. Please get active on this. It's no good being awake if we're only as effective as the people who are still asleep. And if you want to get super proactive, you can do a screening of this excellent film that's also available on our website. Lots of people are looking into this. There's alternatives around. New technologies are being built now, alternatives to Facebook that don't compromise our safety and security and privacy online. And increasingly now, cafes across the globe are springing up that are saying, we don't want Wi-Fi here. You're not welcome if you want Wi-Fi. So there's some good news coming out of this as well. But it's in your hands now. This is an issue you're now aware of. If you'd like to take action on it, I would encourage you to do so. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mike Mitcham.